lesson, we're going to be talking about two-step equations that may have fractions and decimals in them, not just integers. But before we start on those new types of problems, let's look at a couple of the ones that we saw yesterday. This first one, we have 8 minus 1x. So we're going to put a 1 right there in front of that x. And now we're going to go ahead and solve that equation. So in order to solve it, we have to start by subtracting 8 from both sides, because we undo the addition or subtraction first. That leaves us with negative 1x equals, and 12 minus 8 is 4. The next step would be to undo this division, or this multiplication of negative 1 by dividing negative 1. And then the end result would be x equals negative 4. So the first one would be negative 4. The second one, we would add 10 to both sides for our first step to undo this subtraction. And 14 plus 10 equals 24. And out front, this crosses out, leaving us with just 3x. So when we divide both sides by 3, we end up with x equals 8. So those are the type of equations we were doing on the last assignment. So what are we talking about today? Well, we're going to have some fractions and decimals, but we're going to do the same steps. So to solve two-step equations, remember we isolate the variable on one side or the other. We undo the add or subtract from both sides. We undo the multiply or divide from both sides, and it depends on where we have the variable, how we go about that. Remember that what you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other side so that it remains an equation. All right, so here's our first problem. As you can see, it looks very similar to the ones we did in our Bell work. But in this case, we actually have a 1/2 out front here. So we're going to minus 1/2 from both sides. Minus 1/2 from both sides. And that will leave us with negative 2m equals, and negative 4 minus 1/2 equals negative 4 and 1/2. And you can actually try that on your calculator. It's quite easy to do on these calculators that I have provided, or the scientific calculators that you probably got from your parents at the beginning of the year. So the next step is going to be divide by 2. I'm kind of running out of room. We need to bring it down a little bit more. So this ends up being 1m equals, and 4 1/2 divided in half ends up being 2 1/4. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so our answer in this case is a positive 2 1/4. How about this one? We've got a decimal and a decimal on this side as well. Let's go ahead and work our way into a solution here. First, we subtract 1, so we get rid of the addition by subtraction. And 1.5 or 2.56 minus 1 equals 1.56. And now we have 0.3x, and that's a negative, out front, and we set them equal to each other. So now we're going to divide by negative 0.3 to both sides, negative 0.3. And we're going to end up with a specific answer. What will that be? Well, we've got a positive divided by a negative. So I've got my calculator handy. I'm going to do 1.56 divided by 0.3, and that equals 5.2. Now we did have a positive divided by a negative, so we had to carry that negative down. So we have a negative 5.2 on that problem. Here's yet another problem. It's got a fraction on the end. Everything else is integers. Let's go ahead and add 2 to both sides. And as we do that, our net result would be negative 3x equals 2.5. 1/2 plus 2 is just 2.5. Now let's divide that by negative 3. So divide by negative 3. That looks pretty complicated, and we can show you a couple of different ways to do that on the board, but for now I'm going to pull out my calculator. I'm going to put 2 fraction key 1 fraction key 2 divided by 3 negative. Oh, I got to do that again. 2 fraction key 1 fraction key 2, so that's 2.5 divided by negative 3 equals, oh my goodness, that just ends up being negative 5/6, or negative 5/6. Hey, that's pretty easy to do, isn't it? So the numbers are a little different, but we do them the same way. So minus 3 from both sides. Look at that. 3 looks like a little bit larger number than 2.72. So we're going to end up with a negative number on that right side here in just a moment. But first we have b over 2.5 equals, and 2.72 minus 3. So 2.72 subtract 3 equals negative 0.28. All right, so let's finish this off by multiplying both sides by 2.5. Multiply by 2.5. Okay, so there's that multiplication. So we've got a negative 0.28 times 2.5, and that equals, so that leaves us with b equals negative 0.7. All right, how many more we got? We got one more problem. Plus 1, plus 1. And if we do that, we end up with negative 3 and 1/3 x plus or equals 5. Because those ones cancel out. So now we've got to divide both sides by that negative 3 1/3. Divide by negative 3 1/3. All right, very good. So that gives us x equals 5 divided by 3 fraction key 1 fraction key 3. And I happen to know that this is a positive and negative, so my answer is going to be negative 1 1/3. So there's a few sample problems, the kind of the problems you'll see on today's assignment. Today's assignment is on Alex. So it's on Alex solving two-step equations that contain rational numbers. Thank you very much.